Today is June 12th, 2025. It's a little after 5:15, and I'm calling the June Infrastructure and Facilities meeting to order with a quorum present. So we'll move on to agenda item number 1, approval of minutes of the May 8th, 2025 meeting.
A motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Alder Neal,
Second.
second from Alder
Second.
Larson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That passes. We'll move on to agenda item number 2, discussion and possible action on preferred design alternative for South Highway 52, East Wausau Avenue from 6th Street to 18th Street. And I believe Alan?
Sure, I can start this
one?
off.
Yeah.
So the staff report is in the agenda packet. And also the SMA is in there that we signed with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Also the public involvement meeting handout and the public involvement meeting comments that were received. So just as a reminder that State Highway 52 or East Wausau Avenue from 6th Street to 18th Street is scheduled for construction in 2029. It is a connecting highway. In that aspect, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation is the lead. They're taking the lead on this. It's not like an SDP urban project where we are the lead. So it's basically their road to rebuild, and they're heading up the design effort. They've hired EMCS, and Stephanie's here, and Kevin Kajawa from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation is also here, and they're going to come up and speak on this. I'm not going to go through all the details on it because I think Stephanie has, and hopefully you've all looked at the handout from the public informational meeting. But basically, that public information meeting was held May 14th, 2025 at Horseman Middle School. And I guess the next step in this is to come up with a preferred alternative or a recommendation to the DOT as to how the city would like to see see that road rebuilt. Ultimately, is the DOT's decision how they want to rebuild it, but we should give a recommendation on our part and what the city would like to see. Also, tonight there's a couple other things on there with the lighting and sidewalk, but we can kind of talk about those after we look at the alternatives. I think Stephanie and Kevin.
All right. Thanks, Alan. This is, again, Stephanie Christensen with EMCS. We've been hired by the Wisconsin DOT to design and help implement a biddable package for Highway 52, which is planned for reconstruction out in 2029 between North 6th Street and North 18th Street. As Alan mentioned, that in your packet was the public involvement meeting packet that has a lot of the background, but I'll just cover some highlights and kind of recap where we're at today. So obviously the existing pavement has met the end of its service life. We have other infrastructure needs out there like city utilities, curb ramp issues, drainage issues, poor signals at North 6th Street, things like that. In addition to those infrastructure needs, what we're also finding is a crash problem, particularly between North 6th Street and North 13th Street. There's a pattern of rear end crashes along this section of 52. And within the handout packet, we do identify kind of those pattern of crashes. Typically in scoping a project, there's a traffic or a crash review done. So this, project went to scoping a couple of years ago. So at that point, you look at a 5-year crash pattern between 2017 and 2021. There were a total of 41 crashes. About half of those crashes involved rear-end collisions. About 37% of those consisted of angle collisions at both driveways and intersections. Again, particularly between 6th and 13th. Obviously, there's no turn lanes, And this section of roadway is posted 25, then we pick up to 35 east of 13th. The school-age traffic was a contributing factor to those crashes. About 40% of the drivers were under the age of 25, and most of those crashes occurred during those AM and PM periods when school is coming in and going out. So, and, then you question, okay, it's 2025, what's happened since then? And in looking at, the data that continues to come through, we're really seeing similar type crash patterns for rear-end crashes, specifically in that segment. So in the scoping of this project, the project did qualify for safety funding to fund safety improvements between 6th and 13th, whatever those might be. So as Alan mentioned, we held a public meeting on May 14th. The invites were sent out on April 30th. Typically, we hold a comment period for 2 weeks after the meeting, which would be May 28th. But obviously, we continue to accept and address and resolve comments throughout the life of the project. So Alan noted that in your handout packet, there was kind of a summary, a general summary of the comments we received. Just be aware, those were the comments really we received prior to June 2nd. There have been some additional comments that have come in since then, and we can maybe characterize some of that as we get to the end here. But those were the comments through June 2nd. So our improvements along the project, other than addressing full pavement replacement, would be some drainage improvements, bringing curb ramps up to ADA compliance. Part of the city's decision, I think, Alan, that you have here on the agenda, is there's a section without sidewalks, so the north side of 52 from 13th to 18th. There was a request that we, study adding sidewalk for continuity and pedestrian circulation there. So that is obviously subject to city approval. We'd replace the traffic signals at North 6th Street and then look at improving that intersection for pedestrians. So push buttons on the signals, crosswalks, actually putting in kind of a turning an island within the right turn lane so that we can shorten that distance for pedestrians through there and give people a comfort level moving through that intersection. I know Alan and his staff are evaluating the full scope of the sewer and water improvements. We know that they would occur from 6th to 13th, looking at what is needed between 13th and 18th. The project would also evaluate street lighting, which again is subject to city approval. So to do those improvements, there is some right-of-way and easements that would be required. And then, obviously we're looking at additional modes of traffic. So the sidewalks, and then also that the typical section, no matter what that is, accommodates bike lanes. We know that this is an MPO bike route through this area, and so we want to make sure that whichever typical section we're selecting accommodates bicyclists. And then part of the process is then also evaluating potential typical sections that would address the crashes that I talked about. So at the meeting, and there is a link in that public handout with the presentation and all of the exhibits, but given the time we have here tonight, we won't rehash that until you have questions. So detailed in the handout packet were the alternatives that we did evaluate or talked about, and we provide those typical sections in the handout. So I'm gonna summarize for you. Alternative A would be basically a safety improvement alternative. This would include a center two-way left turn lane throughout the project. And we had a couple variations of that. Alternative A1 was maybe 12-foot travel lanes with a 13-foot median. Alternative A2 then was more of a minimal approach with 11-foot travel lanes and a 12-foot center turn lane, which would help reduce some of the impacts. Also, sometimes we find that slightly narrowing the travel lanes can help calm that traffic. We then also talked about alternative B, which essentially would maintain a typical section similar to today. So that's a 36-foot face-to-face, sidewalks, terraces, things like that. We did look at a alternative, what's called alternative B1, that would be similar to today. Alternative B2, from 10th Street to the east, we evaluated an option that would actually shift the center line about 6 feet north. And that was really to try to address the steep driveways. So if you're familiar with the project area, there's quite a grade differential from the south side of the roadway to the north side. So as you're looking at trying to bring grades and cross slopes and sidewalks and driveways up to standards, a lot of ADA things drive those slopes, especially through driveways. We have some pretty steep slopes in those driveways. So trying to balance, the left and the right side of the roadway. So we looked at a variation of, could we shift the alignment and try to balance between the two sides? We also talked with the public about an alternative C, which there's not a picture for that, but instead that is an alternative that could come out of public input and public discussion. So maybe that's a two-way left turn lane for just part of the project. Maybe that is the current typical, but with turn lanes at select locations or select intersections. We left that open for public input and to see if that had any legs to go anywhere. Alternative D that was presented in the packet is really more of just a direct replace in kind. So if there's grade issues, cross slope issues, ADA issues, we would be matching grades, and that would be a situation where you wouldn't be fixing some of those geometrical issues, but you'd be fixing the pavement, which is the primary driver for programming this project. Obviously, A is the primary alternative that addresses the crashes. B and D would not address crashes that are occurring out there. So the meeting included a discussion of those alternatives, typicals, also impacts. So in the packet, if you had a chance to review that, we laid out an alternative table of impacts. You can see there's a slight variation between 1/10 or 2/10 between alternatives for the amount of right-of-way we need. So we're talking the order of magnitude per se of right-of-way impacts is pretty similar across the alternatives. And you'll see we also discussed tree impacts. So that's a fairly vegetated corridor. There's a lot of tree root systems that are buckling sidewalks, fairly mature. Probably about half of the trees are ash trees, which I know that is obviously with the emerald ash borer and in some of that. Those are not trees that typically are perpetuated, and many of the other trees are in poor condition. But despite that, because of the depth of excavation for the pavement structure, so we have a pretty poor pavement structure out there. We're planning for about a 3-foot deep pavement structure. That excavation would have similar impacts across all alternatives to tree root systems. So there was a lot of discussion about tree impacts and then, input. And Alan, I'm not sure if you had noted this, with the various alternatives, we tried to, in many cases, we show maybe a 3-foot terrace or 5-foot where we can get it, with the idea that if the alternative in the next phase of our development includes a 5-foot terrace, at least is in as many locations as possible, there's this possibility of replanting trees under either a future city project, or there could be what's called community-sensitive funding that could be requested by the city that may cover some of that. So we did have a lengthy discussion about tree impacts. Like I said, we received written comments from about a dozen people before, after, or during the meeting. You can see the characterization of those comments in that list. Really, some of the comments supported the two-way left turn lane. Some of the comments questioned the need for that center turn lane and just promoting a turn lane at intersections. In addition, there were comments requesting the city evaluate a speed reduction. And maybe again, just to reiterate, the speed from 6th to 13th is 25 miles an hour. That is statutorily the correct and lowest speed limit for that type of roadway in that area. The speed limit goes to 35 from 13th to 18th. If you recall, that is not an area where we have a lot of crashes occurring. So the question was, some of the questions were, why take the center turn lane all the way to 18th? So if you look at the project, say we were to carry a center turn lane all the way to 13th, you really have about 1,000-foot gap where you would go back to an undivided section, and then at 18th, you're coming back to a divided section, right? Because you guys have an improved intersection there with a divided median. So I think for continuity purposes, and we did hear from some of the property owners who lived or worked in that segment that there have been crashes, recent crashes or near misses or things like that. So that kind of characterizes what we talked about, what we've heard, and I guess I'll turn it back over to Alan and the committee to ask any questions you may have of us.
So I just wanted to, thanks, Stephanie. I just wanted to say my staff report, the recommendation was for alternative A2, and I guess that was based on the safety aspect of it, the two-way left-hand turn lane, and because the amount of crashes out there that were identified and the comments we heard at the meeting. And at A2 too, because it reduces the impact or the footprint from the A1, with the lanes reduced to 11 feet and the center turn lane reduced to 12 feet. It's an attempt to do some traffic calming and reduce the impacts to the real estate. But my recommendation would be to have a 5-foot boulevard that is for the replanting of the trees. And to get the green space, it's hard to vegetate in a 3-foot area. So if the committee has any questions for myself.
Yeah, just before we start taking comment, I would like to make sure we did get an email on this, that everyone was able to read that for public input. So we'll add that to the minutes too, just so that's on the record. Alder Larson.
Yes, and looking at the difference between A1 and A2, my question is how much more property is going to have to be given up by property owners on each side to accommodate this A2?
Well, if you're comparing A2 to A1, A2 has less impacts just because what we're doing there is we have a foot less in the center turn lane and a foot less in each lane. So you have 4 feet less of an impact
I'm sorry,
there.
I was looking at the wrong one, so, yeah, okay. So they're not going to have to forfeit any more of their land for the street and the sidewalk
I would characterize it as a foot or less. It depends, east of 13th, we have an existing 66-foot right-of-way, and west of 13th, we have 60 feet. So in some cases, it's 0. Some cases, it's a foot. I think it depends where you are along the alignment. If I can then refer in that table, that's in that handout, where's a table of preliminary impacts, you could see now this is based on a pre-30% design, but the estimate of difference in permanent right-of-way was 1/10 of an acre. So 4/10 versus 3/10 based on the design going into that meeting.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Discussion? I guess, Alan, this is a pretty big project. It's a lot of information we just got handed. I mean, what's the priority on this? Do we need to move this along this month? What's the urgency, I guess?
Well, like Stephanie said, they're in the middle of the design here. 60% plans are due, Stephanie, like towards the end of this year. So I guess if we have any questions, we can answer them. I mean, we'd like a recommendation moving forward tonight, if we're comfortable with that. I think.
So, yeah, and the goal, I mean, so part of the issue is, right, the project is scheduled for final plans out in May of '28. We typically have to back that off about 2 years to acquire the real estate. That takes us to May of '26. So we were targeting getting to an environmental document by early next year. And maybe we should clarify that some of the steps to get to the environmental document are, one, to take the preferred alternative and refine that design and run it through what we call a 30% plan review by the DOT and the city. We would also then go back out to the public to share a refined design, talk about what we would call a recommended alternative, right? Because it becomes preferred once we have an approved environmental document. So talk about our recommendations, talk about the comments we received, talk about the decision-making process, and then move forward. So I think ideally you're asking for a decision. I think that there's some flexibility, right? So if this went to the next month's meeting, right, which would be July, and then to council, it would put us in later July with a decision. But I guess I'm going to defer to Alan on that, or Kevin, if you have any concerns with the committee, making a decision or
It probably-
having added discussion.
It probably wouldn't reach full council until August, just the way our meetings fall, but
Okay. Even if you moved it ahead tonight?
no, if we moved it ahead tonight, we could get it in July then.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Alder Martins?
Yeah, do we need to, before we make a decision here on a design alternative, do we need to discuss the lighting and tree impacts? Or should we move through that first before we make a decision on what alternative we want to kind of move towards?
So Alan, I think your decisions on lighting and the sidewalk are likely independent of
Correct.
which alternative is selected, because I think, Alan, you were saying we would propose that with any alternative
Correct.
that's selected.
So we can go over that a little bit here, but I think those are, like Stephanie said, those are kind of independent of whichever alternative is chosen. I would still like direction on the lighting and the sidewalk. If this committee would look to revise the state municipal agreement to include the lighting and the extension of sidewalk.
Mr. Chair?
I had, Andrew had a comment first. Alder Wesson, so.
Thank you. Just real quick, I'm going to put my planner hat back on. And so I think it would be valuable input if the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee could have a chance to take a look at this. We had a little, we had mentioned this project was up and coming in April, and that there was going to be a public information meeting in May. We did not have a May meeting just because of timing. It fell on Memorial Day week. But regardless of what decisions made here tonight, they still want to take it up at their meeting in June. So if there's the ability to,
I
take a
guess
little more diligence on this,
That,
then
that was my question is, when you will be meeting in June?
yes.
So I mean, we could still make a decision and it could go to you guys before it came to full council and we could
Sure.
both,
I mean, either way, it's just,
we could both bring it to council.
they would like to take a swing at it too, so, thank you.
All right, thank you. Alder Larson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If the staff recommends to go with item number A2, I wouldn't have a problem going with, from what I see, going with A2. I would recommend we go with that and then work with the trees and the lighting around with A2.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, so.
I'd second.
I have a motion to move forward with alternative A2 for this phase and a second from Alder Watson. Comment, Alder Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, A2 looks doable to me. On the illustration of A2, naturally our icons are not in scale to reality, because these cars look like they're 10 feet wide, and the bike, the bicyclist is extending elbows beyond 4 feet, so it's all pretty not to scale. So question I have is, if we feel a little pinched here and there, first of all, why is the turn lane not 11 feet like the travel lanes? Why does it have to be a foot wider? And the bike lanes at 4 feet, could they stand to be 3.5 feet? If both of those things were done, we'd have gained 2 feet anyways. That would help us with our trying to get the most out of our terrace.
So to address the question basically about geometric standards. So every piece of that typical section has kind of a minimum and maximum could be a waste of money, but right, typically a minimum. So for this particular highway, travel lanes can be a minimum 11 feet, or the typical desirable is 12 feet, right? So it's 11 feet in A2, 12 feet in A1. The center turn lane, the range on that is really a 12-foot minimum and a 14-foot desirable. So that's the range we can select there. Typically, you want that extra buffer in there as people are pulling in. So the 12-foot is the minimum number, the 11-foot is the minimum number. And then to address your question about the bike lanes, and feel free to support from the bike ped side. So a bike accommodation is 3 feet or 2 feet. A bike lane, desirably, the desirable number is 5 to 6 feet, but it can qualify as a bike lane for 4 feet. So with the 2-foot pan on the outside and then having that 4 foot of space between the what we call the flag line of the curb and gutter and the traffic lane qualifies as a bike lane. And again, because this is an MPO bike route and the bikes are very important, the 4 foot, we really shouldn't go less than that, because then we can't call it a bike lane. And I don't think that would probably make it through that committee.
All right, thank you.
Does that, okay.
Alder Martins?
Yeah, thank you. And I think there's a looking at these alternatives, I would definitely lean towards alternative A2. It's been a while, but years ago, the kids went to both Horace Mann and Wausau East, so I'm very familiar with the traffic patterns along Wausau Avenue, even though it's been a few years. I know how that congestion happens during the school hours, and especially when there's events at either of those schools. So I really do see the benefit of the turning lane on on that stretch of Wausau Avenue, just to kind of minimize that congestion, especially around the 13th Street intersection, around the grocery there, Fresh Market, and I forget which street that's on. So those, I really see the benefit there. As for the widths, I like the idea that narrower, that we're kind of moving towards those narrower widths for the traffic calming. I don't want, we read a lot about bloat and of street bloat, in the design of roadways, and just trying to keep towards those minimums. I feel, definitely, because this is a neighborhood, and that would definitely give, and there's a definite appeal towards those just a little bit narrower travel lanes to try to calm the traffic a little bit, and it especially, if we're going to go with a 4-foot bike lane, and then and have the advantage of that 12-foot turn lane. I don't sit on the Bike and Ped committee, but I've done an awful lot of cycling on the roadways, and I know what happens when you're in the roadway with a 4-foot bike lane. Motorists will veer naturally towards that turn lane when they overtake you. So there is an element of safety there, even though we do have the bare minimum for a bike lane. So I do appreciate that. Trees and lighting, that's going to be another thing that we're going to have to tackle. But as for the roadway elements itself, I'd be supportive of alternative A2 at this point.
All right, thank you. I'm happy to see something with 6th Street in that whole intersection, because that's where I mainly go through there. And there's also, I see a 3-foot curb area to help with the bike travel. I do a lot of biking on the streets too, so I like to see that. And so this will go to council in July, and Bike and Ped beforehand in June. So any amendments probably will come out of those, and we can make them at council also. But I think this is a good starting point for the city. Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of alternative A2, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And none are opposed. And that passes 5-0, and we'll let Bike and Ped.
And now we should address the other 2 issues in there, in the item. We don't have to, but maybe we can bring those to the next meeting, but they are
How about,
issues.
we're talking about trees next and then lightings, maybe we
No.
start those?
Other considerations, is the lighting and the sidewalk extension. I don't know if you wanted to deal with those tonight, or,
Okay, so don't move on to the next item?
Correct.
Okay, all right, so I guess we'll move on to lighting?
yeah, so there's some lighting out there now at intersections. If we wanted to go with continuous lighting throughout, and this would be your typical, the trombone arms, the larger lighting, the DOT would participate in that 50/50, and the estimated cost of that is $357,500. That is not in the current SMA, but that is something the DOT is willing to chip in 50/50. If we wanted to go decorative, anything beyond, that cost would be ours. Am I stating that correctly? So that's something to consider. That would come forward. If we say absolutely not, then that would not come, we would not have to revise the state municipal agreement. And the other item is sidewalk extension. Right now, there is not sidewalk on the north side of the street from 13th to 18th. If we want to add that sidewalk to make it a continuous sidewalk up to 18th, the state would pick up 80% of that cost, and the city would be 20%. And that cost is estimated at $19,500. So those 2 items would need to have consideration of this committee. And if you move to do that, then that state municipal agreement would come back to this committee for approval.
Okay, we want to take them individually. We'll start with lighting, if that's all right. Alder Martins?
Okay, thank you. Now, you mentioned that for this project, we're looking at continuous lighting systems, so that would be lights all the way from 6th to 18th Street, correct? And right now, there's gaps in that.
Correct.
What is the advantage of having to add that extra amount of lighting along the roadway?
I think the advantage is you're not going from lighter areas to darker areas. It's a continuous lighting system that provides the same amount of light the entire width. So you're not going from dark areas to light areas. So I think it's a safety advantage also.
Okay, but would there'd be an impact to the homeowners, I guess, because there are a lot of residences, especially on the south side of the roadway? Or not so much?
Well, the lights are designed, there could be some light scatter, but obviously the lights are designed to push the light onto the roadway.
Okay. Okay.
Alder Watson?
So is it similar to a lighting structure we have somewhere else? Is it down Merrill Ave or?
It'd be probably similar to like what's along Grand Avenue now,
Okay.
the larger trombone arms.
Cool.
Possibly, they wouldn't be that tall. I think, what's the standard? 30 footers. I think those are a little taller.
Okay.
It'd be similar to what's on like Sherman Street.
Okay. Just so people can have, and I
Yep.
can have a picture in my mind. And then you said 50/50, so the out-of-pocket for the lights, right? 50/50, so it would be like almost 200,000 for the city? Because you said
Well-
it's about 400 Gs for.
No, the city's cost so the total lighting system is going to be around over 700,000.
Okay.
The city's cost would be half of that, 357,500.
And then for the other, that would be about 20 grand, right?
Correct,
And that
19.5
would
is
be
the-
for
is the-
the
is the
sidewalk
current
extension.
estimate.
Because then that goes to, there still could be school walking, students walking, I mean, right? Between 13 and 18th?
Well, currently, there's sidewalk on the south side, so
Oh.
they would have to cross and get to the south side. If we put it on the north side too, then they wouldn't have to cross to get,
Okay.
there'd be sidewalk on both sides, continuous from 6th all the way to 18th.
I don't know, I have a hard time saying no to having something subsidized and having lower costs for getting really safe. I mean, I agree with you about the lighting. Like if I'm riding a bike at night, it sort of messes with you a little going in and out. And then it's sort of nice to have those lights continuously. So cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking also that Safe Schools report that we had come out. I wonder if they discussed that at all. Extending that sidewalk, but I'm sure they would recommend it, would be my guess. Alder Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the same concerns of Alder Martins with the lights, because I know how some neighbors, they don't like that extra lighting shining inside their house, but, so Alan answered the question here, but I guess, when you're looking at the money for this, I'm sure it's gonna add to the city debt and all, but, I think that the safety features here with the sidewalk and the lighting and the bike lanes and stuff is gonna outweigh the cost, and so I'm thinking it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then, is this street on the 5-year plan for street reconstructions?
Well, it's scheduled for reconstruction in '29, is what the DOT's
But,
schedule.
okay. I guess our costs, do we have those budgeted in that 5-year plan? If we add these?
Yeah, so the costs are outlaid in the SMA that was included. The municipal funds at this point are relatively, only 58,000, because we're only paying for 25% of the initial design costs. But if we add these costs with the lighting and the sidewalk, and then also the utility costs aren't in here, which the sewer and the water costs are going to be significant on this, but those are separate from the road reconstruction.
Sure. If we add this cost, I'm assuming we would just
It would be
do one less block or on a different street or something like that.
It would be included in the '29 budget. And
Sure. Okay. Alder Watson.
I guess I would, do you want a motion to accept the lighting recommendations and the sidewalk extension?
Are we agendized for that?
I don't know. yeah, I guess.
Kind of
this-
looks like we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I consider those part of the design alternative, but we can bring those two items back if you don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, you can give you some time to ponder those, but I don't think those are as critical moving forward. But I can see, we can bring those two back.
I guess if we can bring them back, I'm really on the fence with the lighting, and I think I need some more time to think about this.
Okay.
If I could add, Mr. Chair,
ahead.
could we look at traffic count during darkness hours? And we're looking at our need for lighting. One of our main things is school traffic, which is typically not heavily in darkness hours. I guess maybe in the dead of winter, but I maybe just a feel for what is the real need for the continuous, so just so we feel we're doing the right thing.
Okay, we can,
All right,
we can
yeah, go
bring
ahead,
that
Alan.
back in July, those two items. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we'll put those on the agenda for July. All right. Are we good with item 2 then? Okay. Thank you, everyone. With that, we'll move on. So these next items are only for discussion. I've had a lot of questions brought up to me and asked to be put on these agendas. I agendized them just for discussion today. If we want to make changes to policies or anything like that, I guess I would encourage the people driving these discussions to, we can discuss policies we want to change, but to maybe make a change to that policy and then bring it back to July also, and then we can vote on a finalized policy and actually get some changes done. So with that, I'll start with agenda item number 3, discussion on street reconstruction, tree preservation. TJ, you want to start?
Sure. Each year we have our street reconstruction projects, and with that, there is some tree removals that's required due to the nature and scope of the project. We also discussed this item in the May Parks and Recreation Committee meeting, but we'll take a little bit of a different approach and go over, what our design process is, and then John can talk a little bit about what our collaborative effort is when choosing which trees need to be removed and which trees we can save. So once, these projects are passed through the budget, we start a design process, and the first thing that we go through doing is determine what the roadway width is. And when determining the roadway width, our ordinance for most of our typical projects, which are residential streets, is 33 to 37 feet at the back of curb. In determining which width we go with, we look at the existing street width. Is it handling traffic? What's the average daily traffic? Is it a bus route? Is it a truck route? Is there a school or proximity to a school? What are the parking restrictions? Is the street being parked? And then pedestrian access, and if it's acceptable or if we need to add bike lanes. So those are what we look at when determining the bike or the roadway width. And then once we do determine the roadway width, we move into the rest of the design aspects for the street reconstruction. And typically when we do these street reconstructions, they are chosen because the roadway's in very poor condition, but also the utilities are old and failing underneath. So most of these projects, we are replacing all of the water, sewer, and storm sewer. So with that, we have water main, we have our sanitary sewer and storm sewer. All of them have to, per state code, be 8 foot of separation from that water main. And the water main is typically 8 feet deep. Our sanitary sewer can range from typical 8 to 12 feet, but then we do have, like this year, we have some that's 20 feet deep, which requires a larger hole and larger excavations. And then, once we get all that main work done, we do have the sidewalks that need replacement. We have driveway approaches. We have service walks, and then the water and sewer services that are running perpendicular from the mains into the homes. So our typical streets, if we do a 37 back-to-back, our right-of-way does vary, but what we typically end up with is a 4-foot terrace or boulevard between the sidewalk and the back of curb, where we have our 33-foot roadway widths. We usually end up somewhere between 6 and 7 feet. So once you factor in these narrow lot widths that we run into, the driveway widths, and where we're required to excavate for the services, there's really not a whole lot of area left in that terrace that is unscathed, where we can save the trees. So that's why we do end up losing the majority of the trees. But then, once we do finish our design, we hand that off to the city forester, and he takes a look at, he can speak to it in more depth, but it's really the species, the condition of the existing tree, and then what's the condition of that tree once we do all that excavation around these trees. And that's how we determine which trees should be removed, given the future of the roadway and how those trees are going to react. That's most of our design process. I don't know if, John, you want to talk about your selection process at all, or open up to question?
Thank you, TJ. So like TJ said, they run through the process and bring their design plans to me. So what I'm looking at our street trees is, number one is the quality of our trees in the street. So anything that's fair to poor condition, the trees are already in the process of failing. It's in a downward spiral of its lifespan. We look at removing those. Then again, we talk about the ash trees. Our plan is to remove and replace those. So in this case, we're not going to try to protect, spend that time and effort to a tree that we're going to remove anyway. So we take those out. And then we really start looking at the excavation process. As TJ was mentioning, these projects are big projects, very extensive excavation, a lot of work being done. So if you've been to some of our streets, like say the 2nd Street extension, they're 20 plus feet down and you can't even see the excavator. If we try to leave a larger tree standing there, it physically won't stand. So the point I'm getting at, the next step I really look closely at is the structural integrity of that tree. So a rough number, and it's different by species, but a rough number is 3 times the diameter is your structural stability of that tree. So a 20-inch tree needs 60 inches. That's the structural stability. As we all know, between the between the curb and the tree, those areas are smaller, correct? Don't always get that. That area is now much more important for that tree to retain its stability. So if we're removing a foot back, which is what their plans are for doing that curb, that's a huge issue for us for the stability of that tree and trees falling on houses. And then we're cutting on 2 or 3 or 4 sides. Now we're really isolating that tree and creating a problem where we have stability issues. So typically, the smaller the tree, the more likely it is to survive the construction, and the more likely it is to keep that stability and stay standing for us. So that's how we look at those processes. Now, we tend to be a little conservative on some. I know I go back during the construction process when they run into issues. Boy, we really can't work around this tree. Some things come up as we go, but we try to save some stuff as we can that way. But that's the process we go through in a quick nutshell.
All right, thanks. I guess we'll open it up to discussion and questions. Alder Neal.
Thank you. Well, I'm kind of like the culprit that kind of got some of this, discussion going in parks and brought it to the chair for this committee. The term design or selection process was brought up. And it made me think, when we bought our house on the 900 block of Hamilton Street, part of the selection process for buying our house was how beautiful the neighborhood was. This time of year, it's a tunnel of trees. It's picturesque. A huge asset to our quality of life. A couple blocks over is Fulton Street, undergoing reconstruction. And from 1st Street to 7th Street, it has basically been totally denuded of trees. On the 600 block, 1 tree was left and 18 were taken. Walking down that street, It ranges from, rather large stumps to more moderate-sized stumps. But they're all gone but one. You go on to the next block, they're all gone. Go to the next block, they're all gone. All the way down to First Street. The people that rent or bought houses on those blocks maybe went through a selection process too and really liked the character of that. And they had to wake up one morning and that character was gone. Just gone. That is unacceptable. So to me, it's like, we had the Milwaukee Tree Czar here some years back to really talk about the extraordinary efforts that the city of Milwaukee takes to conserve trees in construction projects. And they're very thorough. And this guy is a tree saver. And he'll find a way to do it. This is, I don't know how many years ago. It was 8 years ago, something like that. We had extensive discussions about the value, the fiscal value of trees, the quality of life value of trees, the real estate value of trees, shade, all these kinds of things, wildlife. It would just absolutely destroy me if I woke up one morning and the 900 block of Hamilton Street was cut down because the street was being redone. Something has to be done. And I'm not saying that, things aren't being done to try to conserve, but I don't know that we are really looking at every possible avenue, like the Tree Czar in Milwaukee does. I would suggest maybe, I don't even know if he's still there. I don't know if that position is still held down there. I don't know if that program is still alive. I sure would like to know. And I wonder, if the director might be able to check, maybe have that person come back. Even if they're retired, their institutional knowledge would still be there to come here and help us. We did develop some standards or recommendations at that time for the city's ongoing projects. I'm not sure if that's being used. I don't know. I don't know if it's in a drawer somewhere. It's been forgotten. I'd like to know that, if it's, it is something that we have taken to heart and is now part of our processes, or is it forgotten? For every problem, there's got to be a solution. It's not just the quickest, most direct line. There has to be other ways. And as I said about Fulton in one of our parks meetings, of that one block that had 19 trees and now has one, it would have been nice if maybe there were 7 instead of 1. Just even 7. And we did extraordinary measures to make sure that we could have at least a tree, instead of maybe like not, all the trees. And then, we'll plant new ones, and then we'll have big ones and little ones. But those extraordinary measures, we just have to look at them. What do we do to kind of as workarounds to deal with, those marginally, might just be a little bit too big trees. But what might we do to shore up and work around until such time as we can deal with that tree as kind of like a sub, project within the project? I want to start seeing this mindset going forward, and I will be that Lorax, until I really feel that we've exhausted everything, because I don't really lend a lot of credence to the engineering mind, which kind of sees that straight line and the quick way to get there is the easiest, most efficient, most cost efficient, blah blah blah. There's something here that goes beyond that. There's aesthetics, there's quality of life, there's people's their love of their neighborhood, their street, their front yard. I hope that we're starting a discussion and a process that will kind of like stop having the normal way we've been doing things. I would like to see either this committee and/or the Parks Committee part of the discussion on every road project in terms of what is our trees situation on this project. Numbers, efforts to conserve, ones that are just too far gone. Sure, ash, they go. Diseased, they go. But I'll tell you, those trees on Fulton Street, I doubt that, 18 of the 19 were all ash. I doubt that they were all diseased. Some of them, unfortunately, were just a bit too big for their britches. Let's start something here. And like I said, either it's in this committee and/or Parks to make it part of this process. I don't want to see this happening in the background and have more constituents crying about what happened. So am I getting any kind of motion forward going here with this discussion? I certainly hope so. So I'll probably have more to say. I don't know, but I'll let it go right now.
Thank you, Alder Neal. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Just want to say thank you for the comments, Alder Neal, because I couldn't agree more. My job, obviously, is to take care of our trees and try to maintain as many trees as we can, something I take to heart. So I know even down on Eau Claire Boulevard, we had left a number of trees down there, though we removed a lot that we expect not to survive, but some of them do surprise us. So we've left some there with the hope of retaining short-term canopy. If they fall out of the canopy, we have new trees growing, and those will be replaced over time. So we do try to do those things, and greatly appreciate your words.
Alder Martins?
Okay, yeah, in this discussion about trees along the roadways, one thing that comes to mind is, it was about, 10, 12 years ago or so, there was a complete reconstruction of Prospect Avenue, all the way from Town Line Road to Forest Street. And when they did the reconstruction, and this included sewer and water and the whole 9 yards, the extent of tree removal for that project is not the same as what we are seeing now in recent history. And looking forward 10 years to today, there is a nice mix of younger trees and mature trees along that roadway. But in order for that to happen, there was, what I believe at that time, a conscious effort to leave the larger trees during the reconstruction process. I know some very large trees were removed, but many moderately sized trees were left behind and are still thriving to this day along Prospect. And it makes for a real nice, 10 years later now, you would know that there was that big construction project. So maybe looking back at projects like that, what we did different then, and why those trees were able to thrive, and why we don't do the plan, do the same type of strategy to address the trees in our current reconstruction projects might help us save more trees in moving forward.
Thanks. Alder Gisselman, you got some comments for us?
Gary Gisselman, 319 Park Avenue, Alderperson, 5th District. Thanks, Mr. Neal. Several years ago, there was indeed a City of Wausau tree planting and preservation specification manual. That was, I think, that came through the Park Department, as well as, I'm not sure if it was this committee or not. But, I've been here enough, whether it be the avenues on the west side, the clear cutting, I just want to emphasize again that look and see what we can be doing, a very conscious effort to preserve the trees. Fulton Street, again, clear cut. Grant Street, I think last year, the year before, clear cut. It's just not a matter of saving 1 or 2 trees, but it is really a matter of clear cutting entire blocks of the city of Wausau. And what if we want to preserve the the sense of what Wausau is, and I think we really have to make a concerted effort on the part of everybody, the city council as well as staff, to come up with plans to preserve trees. Within 10 years, according to what we're doing now, what main streets in the city are going to be completely clear-cut. We're on a movement, I think, now to really, what streets have not been, that have been looked at within the last few years, completely clear-cut. And I would hope that this committee, as well as Parks, seriously, again, looks at that. And I thank Mr. Neal for raising that issue again on behalf of the city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Gisselman. I guess, Eric? Yeah, go ahead.
Should make it clear, that we do reconstruct streets every year, as everybody knows. Engineering does not cut trees for convenience. So I don't want there any thoughts out there that we do it just because it's easier. Each tree is looked at, each block is looked at. We have brought designs to this committee in the past and along to city council as well. And I think that we're happy to do that as well, because I think it is important that we keep the canopy, the ones that we can, right, for longevity. But I also think that there's some significant considerations that will be made: narrowing streets, widening boulevards, those types of things and decisions that the city council and these committees will need to make, even a pushback from the community, because they want their on-street parking and they want different things, right? And so I do think that it would be important to have those discussions with our street designs and things. And we also have to look at the operation and maintenance of those streets, with the plowing, getting down those streets, the maintenance that we have to do on them. So there's a lot of considerations, but I think between engineering, our streets and maintenance, and we're happy to have those discussions and really see what is possible, and also what the committee and city council is willing to step forward on some of these ideas.
Mr. Chair?
Thanks, Eric. Alder Neal.
Yeah, I think, thank you. What I'm hoping to see, and I have brought this up, I brought it up, I mentioned it briefly tonight, and I brought it up before, is the question of process. I do want, the committee, maybe those two committees that I've mentioned, and council, part of the process of street reconstruction. I don't want us to be surprised. I don't want our constituents coming to us saying, what the hell is happening to my neighborhood? I want us to say, we've done everything we can. We are part of the process. We made determinations on a street-by-street, tree-by-tree basis. And I want to see us work towards getting that process in place. So it's an ongoing thing, and I think that's part and parcel of what we're here to do, is to work, is to be part of things, not just make decisions, the big decisions. It's minutia like this, but it affects people very deeply, and I want to think that we all did everything we could as part of any project of this nature. So that's what I want to see. Let's build the process. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just have some thoughts on this. Do we have a calendar or like some step-by-step that we follow every year when it comes to when we redo total streets? Maybe not the specific month, but like this comes first, and then it's got to come to infrastructure, and then it goes to council, and then it's got to go to water work. I don't know. Is there any document like that?
Well, we can lay out that time, but it's pretty much the same thing every year, right? But the difficult part is the budget's being approved in November, and we have to bid them by January, right? So that's the difficult part. We have to have these plans developed, and we can definitely bring some preliminary plans with with how many trees we think are going to get, but it's a relatively tight time frame. I mean, we design and put out streets every year so it's, I mean, we can work on a timeline and we can bring them forward, but I think what we want to avoid is say, you know, we have a tree that, and we have had trees blow down after the projects are done. We have seen that, where we tried to save a tree and it blows down, right? And that creates a hazard so I think what we want to avoid is engineering say, hey, we're putting a ladder on this side, we're taking the sidewalk, on this side, we're taking the street. This tree's not, and John says, you know, the major root structure is going to be, and then this committee says, we need to save this tree. A year later, that tree blows down on somebody's car, on somebody's house. Where are we? Then we're in a situation where, you know, somebody could point fingers, I guess. So I think we need to keep the professional opinions of, I mean, if we can avoid, you know, there's things you can do, but there's some things, you know, the road needs to be there, right? The laterals need to be there. I think we can work to minimize, but I think we've kind of been doing that. I think we have been doing that. I mean, we've been looking at where the laterals lie in relation to the trees, where the road, you know, and we make those professional determinations. But I would agree that it is the street, it does change the aesthetics of the street when we're done. So we'll do what we can, but I think if this committee wants to see those plans come with, and, you know, preliminarily showing the amounts of trees that are taken on each block, we can definitely do that.
Okay, yeah, I'm not even thinking for this committee, maybe it goes to park, or, you know, parks also in their November meeting, just to have that conversation. Alder Neal.
Right.
Thanks. I appreciate you bringing that up about trees blowing over. I mean, I think it was, maybe even before I came to council, there was a tree at the corner of 8th and Hamilton. And a sidewalk was being put in. It wasn't a street project, just a sidewalk was being replaced. This is right on the corner house. And as I was walking, I think I was walking to the Y or something, or walking to work, and, you know, they had, you know, emptied out the area for the putting in the new sidewalk. So it was all dirt. It was all excavated out. And I walked by this tree, and its very sizable root, you know, had been cut, completely sawed, you know, until it was gone, so that they had a nice flat area to put in their cement. And I thought to myself, well, this tree's not going to stand. I mean, any wind blowing out of the north is going to send this tree right into the street, which it did. After the sidewalk was put in, the tree went in short order in a blow. And, you know, I brought this up, you know, years ago what the trees are, and I brought up the fact that there's a house over on McIndoe, just off of 10th Street, that in decades past, they had a couple of large trees on their terrace and or boulevard, or whatever we're calling it this week, that the sidewalk actually circumvented those trees. Rather than sacrifice the trees, the sidewalk did a little meander around them. Those trees are gone now, but they didn't fall over. Stumps are still there. I'm sure there had to be some discussion with the people that lived there. There might have been a request on their part, but, you know, an easement was sought, whatever. We're talking about 12 inches, you know, just to make a little meander around that tree to save it, those two trees. And I thought back, that house, that tree at the house on 8th and Hamilton perhaps could have done that same thing, you know. It's that kind of thinking, and again, please, if we can find that tree czar from Milwaukee and have him come on up, let's have a meeting, let's talk. He does things that are probably not in the norm for most, you know, construction projects. It's his job. I mean, that was the one thing he was there to do. So, yeah, if we meandered a little bit, maybe we'd save some trees, rather than, again, everything's a straight line. Everything is, you know, from A to B, straight line, and we don't mess around. That tree needs respect. That neighborhood needs respect. You know, our aesthetic as a city needs respect. And if it takes something a little different, then let's look into something a little different. Let's stop thinking that everything is a straight line. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder Neal.
Thanks. I can talk a little bit about our sidewalk. A lot of time, we do have a sidewalk replacement program, and a lot of time those sidewalk squares that need to get replaced are because of tree roots, the complaints that come in. So we have been working with John on some of those and how the contractor cuts some of those roots. And we have been, and John can speak to a little bit of this, we have been ramping some of the sidewalks to get over the top of some of those roots. So we have been doing some of that already. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, John. Sometimes the roots are just too big or, but we have been going down some of those roads this year already and other years, but more so this year. I think when we come across a tree, our sidewalk inspector has been working with John on that.
If I may. Yeah, thank you, Alan. There's a few things we're working with more recently here, last year and a half or so. I think been working with their inspector out. We look at the sidewalks as far as our ADA compliance as to width. I know some places we can actually narrow those sidewalks, so we've done that in a few places. We look at species. Some trees can handle a little more root cutting, some can't. Sugar maple super sensitive. So look at some of those things. And we just look at sometimes as well placement. In the past, one thing I guess this committee should know is trees are measured every 40 feet or 30 feet. Tree was put in. Didn't matter what was there. Utilities, sidewalk, it didn't matter, right against the driveways. So we do run into some of that stuff. In some of these cases, when we're doing construction projects, those trees are right in spots they shouldn't have been. So we look at that as well. So there's some cases where we're digging sewer, water, and it's right up against the driveway. That tree should never have been planted there. So we do run into some of that stuff. Is there opportunity to move some of that stuff? That might be very difficult. That'd be more an engineering question. But so we do run into those things as well. And I'll just add to that, we're a lot smarter now. We place them properly. That's our goal.
I am happy to see the barrier, process we're using now to send them down rather than out. That's a great thing. I wish it happened a long time ago.
Okay, I think that was a good discussion, and people will remember this, I hope. I saw Eric take notes about the czar, and I don't know, Alder Neal, if you want to work with engineering and maybe come up with some sort of proposal or policy to maybe find a month that we can squeeze the street projects into a Parks and Rec meeting.
The Lorax will be happy to do that.
Just to talk about and bring it back to us next month, and we can fine tune it and vote. I got one comment. You want to come up? Come up to the mic and state your name and address, please. And then we're talking about the trees.
Well, you kind of blew by what I wanted to talk about when you went on to different topics. So I've got more about the A2 than, if this is not the time, then it's not the time.
Yeah, we already discussed that item.
And I talked to you beforehand, and I said I had comments. You said, okay.
Yeah, I didn't see you raise your hand. Sorry.
I thought you were talking to the board. I've never been at one of these meetings.
Okay.
So you're saying anything I say is moot point.
Well, yeah, we can't talk. We can't go back to the agenda item. It will be at Bike and Ped. So
Say again?
it will be at the Bike and Ped meeting, so we can talk about it then. It'll also be at full council, so we can talk about it then also.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Sorry about that. June 23rd at 5 p.m.
Right here?
In the Maple Room, it's right across here. And from my understanding, this was just the initial design, so there'll be more time to talk about alternatives. Okay, so we will move on to agenda item number 4, discussion on city light policy. And Eric, or Alan, sorry.
Yeah, so I didn't have a lot of background on kind of why this was being brought up, so I just included the current policy for street lighting, which talks about new subdivisions, existing streets and roads, when someone requests a street light, the criteria that is done. So I would just say that on subdivisions, that's handled in, like, new subdivisions, which we just have one now, that's handled in the agreement with the developer. When we reconstruct roads, consideration is given to whether we should add streetlights, like every year for street reconstruction. And then existing roads, if someone calls and requests a street light, that goes to the inspections department and Rick Progalski, and he'll go over the criteria in here and see if that request warrants a light. And if he does, then that request goes to WPS to install a light. So if anybody has any questions beyond that, we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, I guess I would I kind of brought this forward. So the 500 feet between lights is kind of the standard minimum, I see, for existing streets.
Yes, yep.
So if someone had a street where it was a longer block and it's 2,000 feet or something, just picking a number here, 1,000 feet, and I guess what would be the process to get a light added in the middle of that block?
You would call inspections and they would go according to this policy. And if it met the requirements of this policy, then they would request one by WPS.
Okay,
So that's kind of the process.
all right. I didn't know if it was petition-based but okay.
No, it's not. It's just based on requests. So the streetlight request would go to inspections and Rick Progalski.
All right.
Mr. Chair?
Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we discussed this once before when I was chair of this committee, and it's one of those things where you're damned if you do or you're damned if you don't, because some constituents, they want the extra lighting on their street, and then others, they don't want the light shining in their house. So I don't have a solution. I just thought I'd bring that up. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I might have been on the committee at that time when we talked about it, but it'd been a while, and I actually had 2 comments come forward about it. So I just wanted to get this out in public so that everyone knows the process. And if we want to make some changes to it, we actually have a policy and can adjust it.
Right. If you want to bring this, this is just a discussion, but based upon this policy, if you want to make changes to it, we can bring it back.
Sure.
You have to review it and want to make changes.
Sure. I guess we'll go on. Any other? Oh, sorry. All the Martins.
Yeah, I just want to speak on this a little bit, and I think that would be a good idea. Maybe we can absorb this information and bring it back, because I myself have kind of gone down that dark skies rabbit hole, and it's something that I've, over the last few years, really come to value, especially I'm just thinking, recently we've had some really nice astronomical events, like the viewing the aurora and things like that, and you got to get several miles out of town in order to get a dark enough sky in order to see things like that. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that case. I know, in a city the size of Wausau, it's going to be an awful big lift in order to change, how we look at our lighting and address it in a way that is more conducive to just in order to allow you to see the stars at night from, say, like your backyard. But it's something that can be done, and larger communities have addressed this issue and have been, reasonably successful for it. But I just, I don't know if Facebook's like reading my mind or something like this, but I just saw something today that was from the Dark Skies International. They listed the 5 lighting principles for responsible outdoor lighting. And basically, I'm just going to go through this quickly. And number 1, it has to be useful. Use light only if it is needed. Light should have a clear purpose and consider how the light will impact the area, including wildlife and habitats. It has to be targeted, direct light so it falls only where it is needed. You know, we talked earlier about, lights, overspreading the lights, and I think that's the biggest concern residents have, when lights spilling into our house. I know we've got those decorative lights on Prospect, and during the winter months, those lights make a very nice night light into our bathroom at night. We don't have to, you don't have to turn on a light. So there's a lot of spread there. Low level, light should be no brighter than necessary. I think we can look at some of our lighting levels and moderate or adjust them so that they are just, still provide the necessary safety that they provide, but also are not overbearing. Controlled, use light only when it's needed. Timers or motion detectors that are available when needed. And then finally, and I think this is the most important one, and it's something that's probably going to be our biggest lift, this is just a general recommendation for warm colored lighting. We've really moved towards that 5,000, 6,000 K lights, and they're nice because, boy, do they sure light up the area, for the number of lumens they put out. But they also have a negative effect, especially on wildlife, and a much warmer, in neighborhood 2,800 to 3,000 Kelvin lighting would provide the need for adequate lighting, but wouldn't be as intrusive as those high color temperature lights. So I just want to put that bug in our ears so we can think about lighting in a sensible fashion, and maybe as a future agenda item, bring this lighting policy back and tackle these types of issues. Thanks.
Sure. Alder Neal?
Thanks. This reminds me, a bunch of years ago when when Washington Street was reconstructed on the east side, up the hill and whatnot, 10th, 11th, 12th, I don't know how far it went. But at the time, I think I was on CISM at that time, and requested, because I had requests from constituents there, interest in, having the decorative street lighting put in. So I asked at the time, and was told, well, it's not in the budget. We don't have that in this project as part of the budget. But what I was told was going to be done. I hope it was done. I don't know to what extent, but that some infrastructure would be put down to accommodate the addition of future lighting, like the decorative street lights. I don't know if they put in some bases or some conduit. I don't know. I don't know exactly what was done, if anything, but just wanted to bring that up. Maybe we could get an update on it. And was our policy, say about something like that, where we talked about, well, the future addition of lighting here, we've done infrastructure to accommodate it at some point. So now what's next? So, thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. I got a quick question for Alder Larson. Just a second. All right, and we'll move on to agenda item number 5, update on 2025 street reconstruction projects.
Sure, TJ and I will handle this. I'll just give a quick little update on the downtown streets, and then TJ will take over on the rest. The downtown, which is the Washington, 3rd, and Jackson, is going extremely well. The contractor's moving forward ahead of schedule. Washington Street from 1st to 3rd is open, so that traffic can get up 3rd Street now. It is also paved from 3rd to 4th, so it's not going to get opened right away. That probably won't get open until middle of July due to the landscaping and stuff that's got to get through there. But They're proceeding now to pour the concrete south on Third between Washington and Jackson. So they're making really good progress, and the project's on schedule, or ahead of schedule.
I got a couple projects I can give updates on. Our street construction project A, which is Randolph and Cherry Street, we broke that down into 3 phases. The first phase, which is on Cherry Street from West Wausau to just north of Eldred. That project, all the underground utilities are done. Gravel is about 80% down, and then we're expecting the curb to be poured next week. So that is progressing right on schedule and nicely. The contractor has now moved their underground crew to the intersection of Merrill and onto Phase 2. Phase 2 is Merrill Avenue to 3rd Avenue on Randolph Street. They should be out of the intersection middle of next week. They're done with the sanitary sewer, and then they'll go back, do their water, and then progress from the west to the east up to 3rd Avenue. The deadline for that is based around school, which is why they started this week, and they have to be done by mid-August. So they're on schedule to meet those deadlines. And then Phase 3 is Cherry Street from Eldred up to Randolph, and then 3rd Avenue over to Burrick. Once they finish up with their underground on that Phase 2, they'll move over to Phase 3. I'm expecting that sometime shortly after the 4th. The completion date on that is mid-October. The street construction project B consists of 1st Street and River Drive, 2nd Street, and then Fulton Street from 1st to 7th. Again, we broke that down into those 3 streets. So 1st Street and River Drive, that is 100% complete and paved and open to traffic. We recently moved on to Fulton Street. Right now, the majority of the work is between 1st and 3rd Street. We have 3rd Street closed while we're doing the underground in that intersection. We'll open it up for the weekend, but then they'll get back in there and finish up their work by midweek next week, and it should be paved by Friday to open that back up to full traffic. The rest of the street from 1st to 3rd, they'll start doing their concrete, and I would expect that to be done within the next 3 weeks. But their underground crew will then move on to just working their way east from 3rd all the way to 7th. That project is on schedule, and the completion date is early October. And then the final project is our multi-use trail that's going along 72nd Avenue from Stewart Avenue down to Packer Drive or Sunnyvale Park. Again, that project is moving right along schedule. Completion date is August 1st. Right now we have southbound traffic on 72nd Avenue detoured from Stewart down to Packer because we're working underneath the overpass to get some retaining walls in, so we can't allow the truck traffic through. But that detour should be lifted by midweek next week once all the retaining walls are in and the concrete for the curb radiuses on the ramps are done. Our completion date is August 1st. I expect an earlier completion date, probably mid-July for that. Questions?
Alder-
I don't have a question as to the reported street projects, but I just want to get back to what was discussed at our last council meeting, what Alder Neal had brought out about this block of Hamilton Street, and why can't these streets that are being torn up because of the lateral replacement be the ones that are in such dire need, like that block of Hamilton Street that you brought up? To me, just to lay a patchwork down there is a half measure, and half measures avail us nothing. And I don't. We have the equipment. Why can't we just do what you need to do with your machine to tear up their blacktop and lay down your work? I mean, and maybe there is some kind of something in wording in a contract where wherever they dig up, they got to replace it. I don't know, but But I know if I were a resident living on that block of Hamilton Street, I'd be furious that this thing is just being patched after, and I think this is probably just the beginning of many streets that are going to need this. So I don't understand. We've got the manpower, we've got the equipment. This committee authorized to buy the equipment. Why aren't we using it to do these things? I guess what I'm saying is the only additional cost would be for the blacktop that, you know, we have the money for anyway, and we since we have the $250,000 surplus from the snow removal money. I just, it's just, it's a laughable situation to dig up a street to change the lateral lines and then make it worse than what it was. You know, because that's basically what you're doing, and I'm just wondering if there's some kind of action that this committee needs to take now, or put it on the agenda for next month. So, you know, maybe it is in their contract that they need to, replace what they tore up in the street. So, okay, just give them that money back and say, okay, do a few more laterals. But I think, Alder Neal, you get my point. What I'm saying here is it's I've been down Hamilton Street. I've picked up clients there, and it's pathetic. It is outright pathetic. And for the city to turn its nose on it and say, well, we're just going to patch it up again, that's unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we do have on the agenda for next month the resurfacing or the extra asphalt money. I guess I would personally like to see a 5-year plan for streets that we can resurface. I'm sure there's more at Hamilton Street than meets the eye, but Eric, you got a comment?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds super simple, Lou. Well, you just go in and throw some asphalt down.
No,
but
you
there's
have to
actually-
grade it first.
but
I mean, you
no,
gotta
you
tear
have
it
to
up.
mill it.
Yeah,
You have to
gotta mill
take it off. Then you have to grade it. You have to make sure that grades match, and maybe they won't match. But the reality is that the council hasn't approved us for the money to do those things. And so if the council's willing to allocate additional money in '26 for us to do more asphalt overlay, absolutely. We can do it. DPW can do it in-house. It's just, we got $250,000. We'll bring back the streets we think it can do. But also doing one block at a time isn't necessarily the best use of money either, right? And so.
Well, I agree, but it still needs to be done. I mean, it's.
Right, and we can do a lot of streets as long as we have the money to do it, and we plan, and maybe next year we do go in and do 3-4 blocks of that street. I don't know, but it's definitely something that we can look at. But for the lead service lines, yeah, we are trying to put the majority of that money into lead service line replacement, so they are just patching up the holes that they're making in the street. So we had some significant discussions about that as well. But the costs as far as overlaying some of these streets that we're working in, those costs just went through the roof. So, yeah.
I think we're drifting a little far from the agenda item, but if we want to talk about Hamilton Street, I'm sure we can get a price together to redo that one block and bring it back to this committee.
But I think you're going to run into that on a lot of these streets because unfortunately.
That was my point,
The
yeah.
lead service ladder replacement is the older parts of town, right? It's where there's leads, where stuff hasn't been done. And unfortunately, those are the streets that are in the biggest disrepair. So I think to Eric's point, they are going to patch what they disturb. And the rest of the street may be in, disrepair. But most of the times when those streets are in that 3 to 4 condition, that's reconstruct. So.
And hopefully it would move it up the priority list and we can move it up the 5-year plan list.
But we will be bringing us, that $250,000, we will be bringing back a list of streets that we think we can overlay, that we know we can overlay. But to the next meeting, so we can have the discussion then. But I think something like, just for instance, you know, a street that's in disrepair like that, you know, a street where your money goes further is where the curb and gutter's in good shape. You mill off an inch or two and you put back. A concern like this street here, you're taking all the asphalt out, and now you're putting full asphaltic surface back. That's not cheap, and $250,000 will get you a couple blocks in the whole city. So that's something we
Okay.
need to be aware of.
Yep. I think we're drifting a little far
That's
from
okay.
from the
I just
agenda
wanted to-
item, so,
yep.
but we will talk about it.
We will bring back a list of streets that we think can be done.
Alder Neal, something quick?
Sure, just as like maybe an addendum to that information. It was only like, I don't know, 3 years ago or so, on 8th Street, between Fulton and Hamilton Street. This is 2 blocks. This is right behind the East High Apartments. 2 blocks of that road, which, you know, it's in my neighborhood, and I never noticed that there was anything really in terrible disrepair there. But magically, I don't know, about 3 years ago, just those 2 blocks, not including the intersection, but from the intersection to the intersection of Fulton, that was completely asphalted. Just like, almost it seemed like overnight, just boom. I don't know if it was like an experiment or what, but I'd be interested in what the process was that resulted in that, because, yeah, it was completely overlaid. I don't think it was, you know, graded and all that. It seemed to me they just went over. It still looks great today. I mean, but this is 8th Street between Fulton and Hamilton, just the 2 blocks. So, thanks.
And,
Alder
Mr. Chair,
Larson?
can I add to that?
Alder Larson, sure.
I believe when I was on this committee also, I brought up the fact that the Thomas Street from Grand Avenue to Prospect was in such disrepair, and in fact that in one part of it, the road was sinking. And it wasn't in the budget. But I brought up the fact that, you know, that we have $1 million fire trucks going over that street, and we've got a lot of city equipment going over that street, and boom, it got done. It just, they milled it and they got it done. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. Mr. Chair, before you leave, I'd like to talk to you about item 6, okay?
Okay.
So if we're done.
On the record, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion on item 5? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alder Larson?
I brought this to, because I get complaints, and again, I got another complaint from a business. And I think I would like to have a discussion on this move to next month. So perhaps when we can get people here from the police department and 3M here to work on a more workable solution. Since there isn't anybody here from either, there is no point in discussing it tonight.
I'm okay with that. No complaints.
I guess engineering would request that, I guess this item just came, discussion of truck routes. So when an item's brought like that and we have no idea what the discussion, if the person with the alderperson with the item, if they could express to us.
Oh, sure.
You know what, because I just put the existing.
Okay, would you like me to?
Can you talk to that offline between now and
Yeah.
next month? And-
The more detail we
Help
get, the more
Alan out.
detail we can give you
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be glad to chat with you about it, Alan.
Thank you.
All right, then I guess I won't have to leave. And we'll move on to agenda item number 7, update on proposed fleet maintenance facility and possible location. Eric?
I left the staff report. Not a lot of updates. We're still working forward or moving forward with the options that we have on the table that have been expressed before, and then continuing to look for other areas, other properties that may be available.
Mr. Chair?
Alder Neal.
Thank you. Okay, well, I want to I need to own up, you know. The Cherry Street location, which I had on more than one occasion said, I just don't support the Cherry Street location, was really dumb of me because I wasn't quite sure about where the Cherry Street location was. I thought it was elsewhere. And I went driving around looking for it, didn't find it. So then I realized I'm not a West Sider. I don't know the streets that well over there. So I found out where it is, and I rescind any of my opposition to the option for Cherry Street. So there you have it. I'm sorry, and thank you.
All right, thank you. Since I'm still chair, with no objections, I know at the end of city council meetings, we take public comment. It's not going to change how we voted on anything, but if everyone's okay, and the gentleman is still here, if he would like to make his comments. Thank you for sticking around. Sorry I didn't catch your eye earlier. It's it won't change the way we vote, but it'll be on the record at least, and the way we voted.
My name's Gordon Clements. I live on East Wausau Avenue, right about 13th Street, where the speed limit goes from 25 to 35. So when everybody here talks about Hamilton Street or this street or the neighborhood, I hope you can relate to my situation. So I wrote down some notes. They won't be in any consistent order. We talked about the sidewalk going from 13th to 18th Street. Since I live there, and I've lived there longer than half of you have been alive, I get to see what the foot traffic is. I don't see foot traffic that would warrant a sidewalk on the other side of the road from a volume perspective. So as far as Wausau East goes, the kids don't walk. They're driving or they're taking a bus, period. If I see a half a dozen high school age kids walking that road a year, that's about it. So you can't, I don't think, make a case that this is a school issue. Now, if it's a neighborhood issue, okay, I'm not familiar with that. So, and as far as Horace Mann, they would come down 13th Street if they chose to, but there's no sidewalk there anyway, so that's a moot point. So thinking that the sidewalk from 13th to 18th is going to have some value school-wise, I don't see it. I don't think you can make the case. Just from somebody that lives there. Okay. So somebody mentioned that, most of the crashes that happen on Wausau Ave happen, up till 13th Street. No, I can't dispute that. But then to gobble up real estate from 13th to 18th, just for aesthetics, I don't know that that's has all the value that people are putting on it. I will say that I am referring to some documentation that my son has sent to the committee, to some people. I don't know who on the committee has seen it. Probably you have.
We technically can't talk with you right now. It's just your public comment period.
Okay, that's fine.
We have gotten an email.
Yes.
We have gotten
so
an email.
I'm not a subject matter expert, but his position was that when you put in a turn lane, speed will increase. Now, I will tell you, in reality, since I've lived there a long time, people are not going 25 miles an hour when they get to 13th, and they're not going 35 after they get to 13th. So a reality check is, I don't care what the posted speed limit is, they're not driving that speed. And to put a turn lane in to further enhance their ability to go faster is kind of, there's no logic in that. So if you're talking about safety, the turn lane is going to be, or the middle lane or whatever, is not going to serve that purpose. It's going to speed traffic up. Where's your safety value there? And anything from, and I will tell you, living where I live is like living right next to the path of an airport. Because when those cars blast off at 13th Street, it's like sitting underneath a runway when a plane's going over. You can have no conversation until they get a block away. So when you talk about how the aesthetic of the neighborhood, there is no aesthetic of the neighborhood. Your life stops until those vehicles leave, either going up or going down. That's just the way it is. I will quote what I read from my son. We talked about how much acreage is going to need to acquire. In that document that I read, it said the roadbed would go from 38 to 47 feet wide. True or not, I don't know, because I'm not an expert on that. That would seem to be more than the acreage that you were talking about, as far as, I'll make the sidewalk, I'll make the boulevard, or whatever you want to call it, a foot narrower, and make the bike lane a little bit narrower, and I'm going to gain the 3 feet I need, or whatever. If 38 feet to 47 feet is accurate, don't know that it is, that will not cut it. Now you're probably talking about how much traffic how much real estate on both sides, making the boulevard wider because you just gobbled up all that land, and then making whatever you do to the sidewalk. So if someone would look into that, I don't know if it's true, but if A2 goes from 38 to 47, somebody's property assessment is not accurate. Okay. Next. I wish the fellow that was sitting right there was still here, because the review that I read, said that the plan for A1 and A2 do not coincide with the city's or the county's bike plan. I wish I could talk to that fella, but he left. So when you say talking a bike lane goes from 3.5, maybe from 4 to 3.5, even that apparently is not per the recommendation of the bike council. So, it seems to me that somebody's giving somewhere, or somebody's not talking to somebody about what the city's goals are, irrespective of the road construction, to go along with this road construction. Because if they were, there'd be a conflict, and whatever the resolution is, I couldn't say.
We'd like to limit people to 3 minutes. So
Okay, that's fine. That's
Okay.
what I got to say. But I'm saying that traffic is an issue. The sound is an issue. If that was Wausau Avenue, we would not be talking right here. Maybe even not inside the building. Just a consideration. Thanks.
Yep, thank you for your input. And if you stick around, people might be able to help you answer some of those questions. So, all right. That's all we have on the agenda. Take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Alder Neal, second from Alder Watson. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?